realized for various reasons, which Weise also mentions in his diaries, and therefore that Master Mason was asked or offered a job by Mr. Weise to work inside the pyramid, because Weise was getting desperate for some kind of a discovery, having spent 2 years and the family fortune searching inside the pyramid, finding nothing. And Weise decided to use gunpowder to blast his way through the pyramid to what he thought were secret or hidden chambers. They did find so-called chambers of construction, which had a different purpose entirely, some mentioned by me in the second book, some in the new book. And those chambers of construction had a few markings, according to Weise there, which he showed to the British consul in Cairo and the Austrian consul, and they crawled in and signed a document, a facsimile of those writings that supposedly spelled the name of Khufu, and lodged them in the British Museum. I, by the way, was the only one in 150 years that asked to see that, and it took some time at the museum to find it for me. Now, my conclusion was that those erroneous hieroglyphics done by an amateur were really painted by Mr. Hill, and I pinpointed the night in which he went in to do that with paint and brush. The great-grandfather of the gentleman from Pittsburgh witnessed it and wrote to his father in England and said, I saw Mr. Hill go with brush and paint on the pretext that he was going in to make more legible signs that were there, but in fact he was writing new signs and forging the name of the Pharaoh. That great-grandfather wrote it to his father. After that he was fired by Weise and never permitted to come back to the pyramid. Those letters from Egypt were part of the archives that the family took to the United States when they migrated from England to upstate New York, and that gentleman from Pittsburgh knew of them, saw them, recorded the tales of the family of his mother and his aunt about those letters and the incident, and thus there appeared about 2 years ago literally an eyewitness to the forgery, an eyewitness to something that happened 150 years ago.
That's absolutely fascinating, and I think if academic archaeology ever gets around to the business of investigating it, this is really going to rock the basis of Egyptian chronology, isn't it?
Well, not of Egyptian chronology, but of the assumption that Khufu built the Great Pyramid, that his successor built the second large pyramid, that their successor built the third one, and so on. That definitely does not hold water anymore.
I have one more question, if I could ask it. Mr. Sitchin, have you also considered an alternative interpretation of history, one that might include past high civilizations that are of Earth origin, like the Atlantis myth or the Lemuria myth?
Well, I did not have to consider it because we know of it. Because according to the Sumerian texts and according to the biblical version, a much shortened version of those texts, there was a civilization on Earth quite advanced. At least they knew of metallurgy, they knew of musical instruments, just to give a few examples of what that civilization had. And that existed before the deluge. Now the deluge, according to my sources and calculations, happened about 12 to 13,000 years ago, which is at least 7,000 years before the Sumerian civilization, which was a post-diluvial civilization. So the Sumerians themselves and the Old Testament, quoting the same original sources, do tell us of a civilization even before the deluge. which was, of course, wiped out by the deluge.
Have you, if you're interested in Atlantis, have you read Charles Berlitz's book on it?
Yes, I have. Very interesting, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, Dan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Appreciate the question. And we're 36 minutes past the 10 o'clock mark, about the halfway mark on Our Night with Zecharia Sitchin and his new book, The Gods of War and Men. And, Ben, you're on.
Zecharia?
Yes.
2 quick questions. Did any of these alien people remain on Earth, and are their descendants here amongst us now?
Well, you want to know more than I say in my books.
Well, but that's absolutely. I'm talking about your next book.
That's right. Give me a chance to write it.
Okay, then you
You're
don't
a
want
very
to...
psychic person, Ben.
Well, what do you think, Zecharia, or would you rather pass on that question?
Well, let me give you a clever answer. In a way, we are all descendants of them. That is your second question.
Okay.
Because the story that comes out of the Sumerian writings of the depictions is that when they came here and when they had to resort to the onerous task of getting their gold through mining and no longer through a sophisticated process, just by processing the waters of the Persian Gulf. At some point, which is described in the first book, those who were working in the mines mutinied. The description, by the way, Bill, of the mutiny is so vivid, it's as if somebody is describing the march on the Bastille in France, with the torches, with what was burned down, how they surrounded the home of the commander and really kept him in house arrest until he agreed to their demands.
Now,
and
the
so
people
on.
that were working in the mines, were they from the other planet?
Yes, they were part of the 600 who landed on Earth.
That's when they started making people.
Right. Now, the solution that they found, and again the solution was offered by Enki, who was the scientific leader, to the problem, because those who were here refused to continue mining. They had to get the gold for their survival. So he said, there is a being on Earth which already exists. Those, by the way, Bill, are the words of the Sumerian text.
Mm-hmm.
The being already exists. All we have to do is to put on it our imprint so that it could do the work for us.
Uh-huh.
And what they did was they took ape men, ape women who were already on Earth through evolution. And through genetic manipulation, which is described again in great detail and even in pictures, which are reproduced, they jumped the gun on evolution. In other words, I believe that we, Homo sapiens, would have evolved on Earth anyway, but in another 5 or 10 or 20 million years. They jumped the gun, mixed their genetic material with that of ape woman, with the egg, fertilized the egg of ape woman, exactly, by the way, in a process that is called in vitro.
That's right.
And created about 300,000 years ago us. They created Homo sapiens.
That makes sense.
So in a way, we are all descended of them, and that is what the Bible means by saying that we were created in their, by the way, the Bible uses the plural, not the singular, in their image and in their likeness.
Okay.
In their image physically and in their likeness mentally, morally, spiritually.
That's interesting. Second question. In your opinion, what does this all do to all the religious belief systems of a supernatural God, one person who created everything, in your opinion?
I think it upholds it.
It upholds a single God?
Of course.
That means, in what way does that do that? It's kind of interesting. How does that uphold a God that created Earth when we know that these people came from another planet?
Well, sir,
I don't mean to bring you to the
I
wall.
suppose you wouldn't, take it amiss if I say, please read my books.
I will, absolutely.
Okay, because I end the first book, The 12th Planet.
Uh-huh.
I end it with the question which